The following is a conversation between Matías De Stefano, referred to as me, and his higher self, referred to as I am. The date is July 16th, 2021, and the subject is the emotional aspect of the root chakra in the sign of Cancer. The title is Roots. Me, the root of the problem. I am. Me. When we have a conflict, a problem, a trauma, in therapies, both psychologically and holistically, it is often said that we must go to the root of the problem. Why? I am. When you take a tree as a living whole, you understand the roots as part of the being. However, the beings that live on the surface can contemplate from the base of the trunk to the top of the tree, where the branches are, the flowers, leaves, and fruits that are normally useful to humans in this case. In this way, you find that the roots are hidden from the eyes of a person, thus being the unknown part. If you take into account that everything that is at the top is what you see and look for in life, when you have problems with the fruits or the branches dry up, in a plant you usually have to see where this conflict comes from, and usually comes from the roots. Me, because the nutrients come from there. I am. That's right. The root is the first thing that every plant generates when it germinates from a seed. The root is the first organ of a plant that extends, seeking to fulfill two main functions: anchoring in the soil, which functions as an axis for the plant, and sustenance to hold it firm on the ground. And on the other hand, for the absorption of nutrients from the soil, minerals, salts, and water necessary for photosynthesis. In the first case, the axis root begins to seek the greatest possible depth to counteract the weight of the plant or tree growing upwards. And from it, secondary branches begin to emerge that go to the sides like the branches. And from them emerge the adventitious roots, which cling to each rock, embracing the ground. In this way, it is impossible to move the plant, which remains firmly in place. In the second case, each root, especially the adventitious ones, have absorbent hairs that serve as a sponge, consuming the groundwater, dragging with it the salts and minerals of the soil, such as iron, nitrogen, zinc, potassium, among others. These inorganic elements are dragged upwards by means of the raw sap, which distributes them through the branches towards the leaves, where through photosynthesis they can be converted into organic elements that will serve as food and energy for the plant. The roots tend to extend deeper with the aim of finding constant water reserves, such as groundwater, internal lagoons, underground rivers, and thus, despite periods of drought, to be able to continue living. Me. And I think I heard that they drink a lot of water. I am. An average to large tree can consume around 350 liters a day, which is reduced according to its size. The more water, the bigger the tree. Me. But if they drink so much water, why are they dry inside and not like a cactus? I am. Because everything they absorb is released into the atmosphere in the form of vapor. The trees sweat, generating liters and liters of water vapor per day, which are released into the atmosphere, which, when condensed in the cold air, begin to turn into clouds, and these into rain. Me. What, so, are there clouds and rain because of the trees? I am. A lot of rain and storms are generated by evaporation from oceans and lakes, yet another huge amount is produced by trees. For this reason, in the jungles and wooded areas, it tends to rain more and be more humid. Me. Oh. I am. The more trees are planted, the cooler the climate will be. Me. That's why logging is so negative. That's why cutting down trees increases global warming. I am. Basically because the cooling and humidification of the planet is regulated by plants. For the large trees that absorb tons of water in a year and release it into the environment. In turn, this helps with flooding, since the amount of water that many trees together absorb per day prevents large floods that cannot be filtered by hard, dry ground. The roots dig deep holes that allow the water to go towards the internal caverns of the earth, while they absorb liters and liters. But beyond these qualities, the roots also have another function. Me, which one? I am communication. They spread throughout the territory, touching the roots of other trees, especially of the same species. In this way, they exchange minerals as if holding hands, in addition to supporting each other. In this way, they can emit pulses that allow each tree to know if something is wrong. If one of the trees or plants gets sick or is attacked, this information is broadcast to all the others, which begin to generate reserves in case the same thing happens to them. Me, plants speak. I am. And for the most part, they do it for the roots. A forest is like a huge neural network in which each tree interconnects with the others, being like a great thinking brain that regulates itself. Me, wow, it reminds me of the movie Avatar, in which the planet speaks through the trees. I am. That's how this world works. It just seems so much more wonderful how they show it on the screen, highlighting certain qualities of this planet to make it more cinematic. Me. Sure, obviously. Even so, a key to the roots is communication. I am. It keeps each tree in communication and the sky with the earth. Me. So, if he does so many good things, why is the problem always at the root? I am. Well, as I was saying, you only see the superficial part of the tree, but all the elements it needs to make its products come from what the roots absorb and send to the leaves. The water, the salts, the minerals, the fundamental nutrients come from the roots, and what they take from the soil will be the raw material for the flowers and fruits. From this vision, in a family tree, the roots are the first individuals that will support all the others, the first beings to take a direction, to carry out an action that will determine the stability or imbalance of an entire tree. When the fruits are not good, when some branches and leaves get sick, it is usually that something is not coming from the roots well, generating a chain effect, or perhaps the waters are contaminated with some heavy metal. Me, and if the roots absorb it, then it will make the whole tree sick. I am. Sometimes it can be a problem of one's own roots, of not knowing how to hold on well or identify well, but in most cases it is related to the environment from which they receive said information. Me, an example? I am. If in your life you tend to seek to accumulate things, wealth or food, for fear of losing it, it may come from the roots of your tree from a generation that did not have enough to eat and was forced to accumulate food so as not to starve. But this comes from a war context that traumatized said individual, where scarcity conditioned his life. Me. In other words, many of the traumas we have or conflicts we inherit from the roots through the unconscious, which tells us what to do for fear that the same context will happen again. I am. Exactly. All the meaningless attitudes of our life, the decisions that we usually make without thinking, the uncontrolled routines, the illogical needs, the incomprehensible customs, the harmful habits, or even those harmless things that we cannot transcend in our lives, are reactions. Unconscious of attitudes driven by generational roots that drive us to carry out such actions by a natural mechanism that is the, quote, response. Remember that our brain is designed to store data that tells us what is happening outside, to create ideas that are useful when acting in that environment. The response of the nervous system is something natural to be able to adapt to the environment, and the same to obtain a result. They will be registered in the cells as possible solutions in certain circumstances. For this very reason, many attitudes that we have in life are nothing more than response mechanisms that have served at other times, and that we now highlight again because an environment is similar. For example, eating a lot in the face of a conflict with someone. Just like in a warlike context between two parties can lead us to starve, which makes us seek to accumulate food, i.e., eat what you can today because you don't know if you'll be able to eat tomorrow. Thus, in the unconscious, before each conflict, be it a family or love fight, the need to eat to fill the stomach is usually activated, or the stomach emptiness in which it cannot eat, because the body reacts to hunger as an impossibility. Me. Oh, I understand. So, in a certain way, almost every attitude that we carry out without full awareness of why we have decided to do it is a reaction of the unconscious. I am. That's right. Therefore, if you want to resolve the conflict, you must go to the root. And with the root, it means, where did it originate? Through this question, we can delve into the past, into what lies in the shadows, under the pressure of minerals in the ground, which takes us to the deepest and most invisible, to places we didn't even know we could reach. There, perhaps, we find an environment with corrosive minerals, or sulfur, some negative source for the whole tree, some historical context of pain, anguish, oppression, shadows, that help us understand our attitudes. Going to the roots can help us in several aspects. Me, like what? I am. First of all, communicates better with our history, with who we are, with the idea that we are much more than an individual improving self-knowledge and communication with the information of the past, which builds the future, as the roots drive the fruits. On the other hand, knowing the history, the roots of the family, where they come from, why they migrated, their languages, their contexts, the historical events they have experienced, can give us much more complete understanding of who we are, giving us stability, firmness, because a tree that does not know its history has nowhere to settle, as if you were supporting all your weight in just one or two roots. The more you expand the knowledge of your roots and the places where they have spread, the more strength you will have to grow tall and enormous, because you will know the sustenance that supports you. And, of course, by looking at these roots, you can know what they nourish you with. By seeing the stories of your ancestors, you understand what feeds your energy inside. And by identifying it, you can know how to handle this information so that it is useful to you to make a clean sap out of raw sap. Me. But how do I know these stories? Because sometimes we cannot go that far in history. We can perhaps know what happened to our great-grandparents, but further back, impossible if there are no records. I am. Today you can use many ways to know this, because the information lies in your cells. You can research the history of the family. You can perform DNA tests to find out the genetic path and the ethnic groups of which you have been a part. You can also investigate which countries you come from and study their history, find out about the realities experienced at a general level in said territory, which can give you a context in which your family may have lived. Beyond that, you can investigate the general history of humanity, knowing that at some point we have all been connected, since the human population about 80,000 years ago did not exceed 100,000 individuals who left Africa, of which no more survived than 5,000 after the great volcanic eruption that 70,000 years ago changed history. Me, we all have ancestors in common. I am. That's right. And in one way or another, we all lived the same original history, the same route, in Africa and the Middle East, until the groups separated en route to Australia, Asia, and Europe. And still, many continued to connect these territories. Me, like the peoples of the Caspian Sea, the Indo-Europeans we talk about so much. I am. And, in addition to history, we can today resort to hypnosis, regressions, family constellation therapies, ayahuasca, and many other tools. Thousands of conflicts have plagued humanity since its inception, and all of them are in human cells, hidden in the unconscious that drives you to act as you do today. The brain interprets it as a survival mechanism, something useful that has worked for the previous ones, but perhaps, in a new consciousness, they stop being useful and become impediments, which is why you try to eliminate them. But if you remove or deny the roots, the whole tree, with you inside, will die. Therefore, you cannot eliminate the roots, but you can nourish them with fertilizer, new minerals, salts, watering them with clean water, enrich the soil. How? With new experiences. Me. But wouldn't that be living for others? How can I live my life without it being for others? I am. Your life is that of others. Remember, you are part of the tree. You are not separate from it. And what you do for yourself, you do for them. Fulfilling the dreams of the past is to live fully in the present, to show that everyone is still alive in you and that they are free in the freedom of your decisions. Using the past as experience, advice from the ancients, but not as determinants. Me. Going to the root of the problem, then, is not cutting the root. I am. When this phrase is used, it is applied in relation to weeds. There are plants that drown other plants. There are stories that harm the forest. Trees cannot grow free if you don't nip these weeds. If the problem is in your own tree, you will never be able to nip the problem in the bud, as you too will suffer the consequences. But if it's a weed, then yes. Me. And how do I identify what is a weed from what is my root? I am. When it's side stories you can walk away from, for example, from a partner, or from a country or a culture that hurts you. To cut in the bud is simply to stop feeding that force. Remember that if you throw your shit against a weed, all you do is fertilize it, put rich nutrient fertilizer to make it grow stronger. The best thing to eradicate a weed is not to give it love, which is water, not to give it attention, which are salts, not to give it an answer, which is minerals. It is changing the focus of attention, strengthening the bond with others, with oneself, and forcing the weeds to disappear. Me. I was watching a documentary about how Hitler became a tyrant. And when you watch that story, you realize that weeds often grow because we don't give them the importance they require at the beginning. I am. It is important to clarify this here. One thing is indifference, and another not to feed it. Imagine that you have a garden, and there are beautiful plants, but you never cut the grass, you never maintain the rows. The same grass that used to act as a mattress grows, hardening and swallowing the plants. Before your indifference, suddenly the grass will have grown so high that it covers everything, drowning and killing the other vegetation. This is indifference. But not feeding it is very different, because the logic here is to strengthen the plants, to nourish only them, water them every day and clean the furrows. It will not be necessary to uproot the grass, but you will have weakened him by strengthening others, and you will have left him in his place. Me. Today, fascism is growing again in the world. There are new waves in various countries. I am. That is why it is essential to know the roots, because the more people know their origins, the less weeds there will be, since fascisms come from ignorance and unawareness. Me. The hatred between ethnic groups, nations, and families. I am. It's all the same, after all. Lack of oxygenation, lack of attention to the past, lack of nutrients of love and recognition. Going to the roots makes us stronger. You have been led to see the future as the escape from the world's crises, but trees only grow tall thanks to the strength and depth of their roots. Me, I look for them, I know them, and I honor my roots, thus. I am. So your past will build your future, and by knowing the path you have traveled, you will discover the attitudes that your unconscious carries, and from its knowledge, you will be able to understand its logic, and thus transform them into new conscious actions that nourish your tree and all humanity, and create a new story. Me, I am vibration of creation. I am. You are the root of a new tree.